A tiny German Shepherd puppy, barely 8 weeks old, showed up on the doorstep of a complete stranger and refused to leave no matter what anyone tried. For 3 days he sat there patiently, ignoring food, water, and even attempts to carry him away. The homeowner was baffled, neighbors were concerned, and animal control was stumped. But when they finally discovered the heartbreaking truth behind the puppy's determination, it revealed a story of loyalty so profound that it would restore everyone's faith in the unbreakable bonds that can exist between animals and the people they choose to love. Get ready for a tale that proves sometimes the smallest gestures carry the biggest meaning, and that destiny has a way of bringing the right souls together at exactly the right moment. Tuesday morning in the quiet suburb of Maple Grove, Illinois, started like any other for 67-year-old retired teacher Margaret Chin. She shuffled to her front door in her favorite purple slippers to retrieve the morning newspaper, expecting nothing more than the usual headlines and her daily crossword puzzle. Instead, she found herself face to face with a pair of the most soulful brown eyes she had ever seen. Sitting perfectly positioned on her welcome mat was a tiny German Shepherd puppy, no more than 8 weeks old, with oversized ears that he hadn't yet grown into and a coat of black and tan fur that was slightly matted from what appeared to be a night spent outdoors. The little dog's tail gave a tentative wag when he saw Margaret, but he made no move to get up or run away. "Well, hello there, little one," Margaret said softly, crouching down despite the protest from her aging knees. "Where did you come from?" The puppy's response was to inch slightly closer to the door, as if he was trying to make himself as small and unobtrusive as possible while still maintaining his position. His brown eyes never left Margaret's face, and there was something in his gaze that struck her as remarkably intelligent and purposeful for such a young animal. Margaret looked around her neighborhood, expecting to see frantic owners searching for their lost pet. The tree-lined street was quiet except for the distant sound of children waiting for the school bus. No missing pet posters adorned the telephone poles, no one was calling for a lost puppy, and there were no obvious signs of where this little visitor might have come from. "Are you hungry, sweetie?" Margaret asked, though she had no dog food in the house. She had lost her beloved golden retriever, Honey, 6 months earlier and hadn't had the heart to consider getting another pet. At her age, she had reasoned, it wouldn't be fair to bring a young animal into her life. She went inside and returned with a small bowl of water and some leftover chicken from last night's dinner. The puppy sniffed politely at both offerings but showed little interest in either. Instead, he repositioned himself more squarely on the doormat and settled in as if he had found exactly where he belonged. Margaret spent the next hour trying to coax the puppy to move. She offered treats, attempted to lure him with toys, and even tried gently picking him up to carry him to her backyard where he might be more comfortable. Each time, the puppy would politely accept her attention but immediately return to the exact same spot on her doorstep the moment she set him down. By afternoon, word of the mysterious puppy had spread through the neighborhood. Mrs. Patterson from next door stopped by with a bag of dog food she had left over from her deceased poodle. Mr. Jameson from across the street brought a small blanket. The mailman Dave, who had been delivering to Maple Grove for 12 years, paused his route to examine the determined little visitor. "Never seen him before," Dave confirmed, scratching his graying beard. "And I know every dog on this route. This little guy just appeared out of nowhere." Margaret called the local animal shelters and veterinary clinics, hoping someone was missing a German Shepherd puppy. But no one had reported a lost puppy matching his description. The animal control officer, Lisa Rodriguez, stopped by in the late afternoon and was as puzzled as everyone else. "He's healthy," Lisa observed after a gentle examination. "Well-fed, no signs of abuse or neglect. But he's definitely not microchipped, and there are no identification tags. It's like he just materialized here." As the sun began to set on that first day, the puppy remained steadfast in his position. He had created a small nest in the corner of Margaret's doormat, and despite the offers of more comfortable accommodations from well-meaning neighbors, he showed no intention of moving. Margaret found herself checking on him every few hours, bringing him fresh water and food that he continued to politely ignore. There was something about his unwavering determination that both puzzled and touched her heart, though she couldn't quite understand why this particular puppy had chosen her doorstep as his destination. The second day brought with it a steady stream of curious neighbors and concerned animal lovers, but the German Shepherd puppy remained unmoved by the attention. Margaret woke to find him in the exact same position as the night before, alert and watchful, as if he was guarding something precious. Dr. Emily Foster, a veterinarian from the nearby Oakwood Animal Clinic, arrived at Margaret's request to examine the mysterious visitor more thoroughly. The puppy submitted to the examination with remarkable patience for such a young animal, allowing Dr. Foster to check his teeth, eyes, and general condition without resistance. "He's in excellent health," Dr. Foster announced to the small crowd that had gathered on Margaret's front lawn. "Someone has been taking very good care of him. His teeth suggest he's exactly 8 weeks old, he's been properly socialized, and he shows signs of early training. This isn't a stray puppy, Margaret. This is someone's beloved pet." But that revelation only deepened the mystery. If the puppy was so well cared for, why hadn't anyone reported him missing? Dr. Foster took photos to circulate among local veterinary clinics and posted them on social media, hoping to connect the puppy with his family. Margaret had spent a restless night worrying about the little dog, checking on him every few hours and bringing him blankets when the temperature dropped. Each time she approached, he would wag his tail and look up at her with those expressive brown eyes, but he refused to be coaxed inside, even when a light rain began to fall just before dawn. "He's chosen you, Margaret," observed Sarah Williams, Margaret's closest friend and neighbor of 20 years. "I've never seen anything like it. It's like he knows something we don't." The comment stirred something in Margaret's chest that she couldn't quite identify. Since her husband Robert's death 3 years earlier, and especially since losing Honey, Margaret had felt increasingly isolated. Her children lived on the other side of the country, and while neighbors were friendly, she often went days without meaningful conversation with another living being. Local news station WQED sent a reporter to cover the story of the determined puppy, and the footage of the tiny German Shepherd maintaining his vigil on Margaret's doorstep quickly went viral on social media. Viewers from around the country began commenting with theories about the puppy's behavior, sharing their own stories of animals with mysterious purposes. Animal behaviorist Dr. Marcus Thompson drove in from Chicago after seeing the news coverage. His examination of the puppy revealed behaviors that he found both fascinating and puzzling. "This level of determination in such a young animal is extremely unusual," Dr. Thompson explained to Margaret as they watched the puppy ignore a group of children who had come to see him. Young puppies typically have short attention spans and are easily distracted. This little guy is demonstrating focus and purpose that's more characteristic of a much older, highly trained animal. The puppy had begun to develop a routine. He would sleep curled in the corner of the doormat, wake at sunrise to watch the street come to life, accept water from Margaret when she offered it, and then resume his patient watching. He showed mild interest in the various visitors but never moved from his chosen spot. Local restaurants and grocery stores began donating food and supplies for the puppy's care. A nearby pet store provided a comfortable outdoor bed and toys, though the puppy showed little interest in playing. It was as if he was on a mission that required his complete attention and dedication. Margaret found herself drawn to the puppy's unwavering commitment. There was something almost spiritual about his patience, his certainty that he was exactly where he needed to be. She began sitting outside with him in the evenings, reading aloud from her favorite books while he listened with the attentiveness of a much older dog. "What are you waiting for, little one?" she whispered to him on the second night, gently stroking his soft fur. "What do you know that the rest of us don't?" The puppy's only response was to rest his small head against her hand, his eyes never leaving the quiet street beyond, as if he was watching for something that only he could see. By the third day, the story of the determined German Shepherd puppy had captured hearts far beyond Maple Grove. Social media posts about his vigil had been shared thousands of times, and people from neighboring states were driving to Illinois just to see the remarkable little dog who refused to abandon his post. Margaret found herself becoming an unlikely celebrity as reporters and animal lovers gathered on her usually quiet street. She handled the attention with the grace of a retired teacher who had spent decades managing classrooms full of energetic children, but she was more concerned about the puppy's welfare than the media circus surrounding him. "He's not eating enough," Margaret confided to Dr. Foster during her second visit. "He'll take a few bites when I offer food, but it's not nearly enough for a growing puppy. I'm worried he's making himself sick with this vigil." Dr. Foster's examination confirmed Margaret's fears. The puppy had lost weight and was showing early signs of dehydration despite the water that was constantly available to him. More concerning was his behavior. He had become even more focused and alert, as if whatever he was waiting for was drawing closer. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Mrs. Eleanor Hartwell, an 89-year-old woman from the nearby town of Riverside, had been following the story on the local news. On Wednesday afternoon, she arrived at Margaret's house in a taxi, moving slowly with the aid of a walker but with determined purpose in her pale blue eyes. "I need to see the puppy," she told Margaret without preamble. I think he might be looking for me." Eleanor's story unfolded like a heartbreaking puzzle piece that suddenly made everything clear. 2 weeks earlier, her grandson David had surprised her with a German Shepherd puppy for her 89th birthday, hoping the companionship would help with her increasing loneliness. Eleanor had named the puppy Max and had fallen instantly in love with his intelligence and gentle spirit. David thought a puppy would be too much work for me, Eleanor explained, her voice shaking with emotion. When he saw how much I loved Max, he started to worry that I wouldn't be able to care for him properly. Last week, while I was napping, David took Max to what he said was a better home with a family that had children and a big yard. Margaret felt her heart sink as she understood the implications of Eleanor's words. You think Max somehow found his way here looking for you? Not looking for me, Eleanor said softly, her eyes fixed on the puppy who had suddenly become alert at the sound of her voice. Looking for you. You see, David told me about the family he found for Max. He said they lived in Maple Grove and that the woman reminded him of me, a retired teacher who had recently lost her husband and her dog. The pieces of the mystery began falling into place with stunning clarity. Margaret remembered a young man who had knocked on her door about 10 days earlier, asking questions about the neighborhood and whether she might be interested in adopting a dog. She had politely declined, explaining that she wasn't ready for another pet after losing Honey. That was David, Eleanor confirmed. He was checking to see if you might change your mind. When I told him how heartbroken I was about losing Max, he promised he would try to bring him back to me. But then I had a fall and ended up in the hospital for a week. Dr. Thompson, who had been listening to Eleanor's story, shook his head in amazement. So Max somehow escaped from his temporary home and made his way here, to the house where his original owner's grandson intended to bring him? The puppy, as if understanding that his vigil was finally being acknowledged, stood up for the first time in 3 days and walked directly to Eleanor. His tail wagged with the enthusiasm that had been absent since his arrival, and he pressed against her legs with the familiarity of an animal who had found exactly what he had been searching for. Eleanor knelt down despite her arthritis and gathered the puppy into her arms. Hello, my sweet Max, she whispered. How did you find your way here, baby? How did you know? But the reunion that everyone expected to be the end of the story was actually just the beginning of an even more remarkable chapter in the lives of 3 souls who were about to discover that family can be found in the most unexpected places. The reunion between Eleanor and Max should have been the happy ending everyone was hoping for, but reality quickly set in as the practical challenges of their situation became apparent. Eleanor's recent fall had left her with mobility issues that made caring for an energetic puppy nearly impossible, and her grandson David's concerns about her ability to handle a young dog had been well-founded. Margaret watched from her doorstep as Eleanor struggled to stand while holding Max, and her teacher's instincts immediately kicked in. She helped Eleanor to a chair on the front porch while Max settled contentedly at the elderly woman's feet, finally at peace after his 3-day vigil. I can't take him back, Eleanor admitted with tears in her eyes. As much as I love him, David was right. I can barely take care of myself anymore. But I couldn't bear the thought of him being with strangers when he should be with family. Dr. Foster, who had witnessed the entire reunion, sat quietly observing the interaction between the 3 unlikely companions. Margaret had been watching Eleanor with the same protective concern she had once shown her most vulnerable students, while Max seemed content for the first time since his arrival, alternating his attention between both women. What if he doesn't have to choose? Dr. Foster suggested carefully. Margaret, you said you weren't ready for another dog, but you've been caring for Max for 3 days. And Eleanor, you clearly love him, but you need help with his care. Has anyone considered that Max might have found the perfect solution on his own? The idea that had been forming in Margaret's mind since Eleanor's arrival suddenly crystallized into something that felt remarkably right. You could visit, Margaret said softly to Eleanor, as often as you want. He could live here, but he could still be your dog too. I have the space and the ability to care for him day to day, but he needs you in his life. Eleanor's face lit up with a hope that had been absent since David had taken Max away. You would do that? Share him with me? Margaret looked down at Max, who was now sitting precisely between the 2 women, his intelligent eyes seeming to track their conversation. I think he's already made that decision for us, she said with a laugh. He led us all to exactly where we needed to be. David, Eleanor's grandson, arrived that evening after Eleanor called to explain the situation. The 34-year-old software engineer had been wrestling with guilt over his decision to rehome Max, especially after seeing how heartbroken his grandmother had been. When he heard about Max's incredible journey to find Margaret's doorstep, he was amazed and somewhat skeptical. You're telling me that Max somehow remembered this address from when I came to scout the neighborhood? David asked, looking between his grandmother and Margaret. And that he traveled over 50 miles to get here? Dr. Thompson, who had stayed to document this unusual case for his research, nodded enthusiastically. Animal navigation abilities are far more sophisticated than most people realize. Max was highly motivated to solve a problem, his separation from Eleanor, and somehow determined that this house represented the solution. The arrangement they worked out was unlike any pet custody agreement anyone had ever heard of. Margaret would provide Max's daily care, exercise, and veterinary needs. Eleanor would visit 3 times a week, and Max would spend every Sunday at Eleanor's assisted living facility, where the staff had already approved him as a therapy animal after hearing his story. But the most remarkable aspect of the arrangement was how perfectly it addressed everyone's needs. Margaret found herself with a purpose she hadn't realized she was missing. The daily routine of caring for an intelligent, loving animal who clearly adored her. Eleanor had the companionship of her beloved puppy without the physical demands that had made his care impossible. As the sun set on Max's 4th day in Maple Grove, he took his first walk around the neighborhood with Margaret, greeting the neighbors who had been following his story with the confident friendliness of a dog who knew he was exactly where he belonged. "He's remarkable," Margaret told Eleanor as they watched Max explore his new backyard with the thorough attention of a dog conducting a security inspection. "It's like he understood exactly what all of us needed and figured out how to make it work." But the true test of their unusual arrangement was yet to come, and none of them could have predicted the challenges that would threaten to tear apart the family that Max's determination had created. 3 weeks into their unconventional arrangement, the first serious challenge arose when David received news that would test everyone's commitment to making Max's unique family work. His job was transferring him to Seattle, and he wanted to take Eleanor with him, believing that being closer to family would be better for her health and safety. "It makes sense," David explained to Margaret during an emotional conversation in her living room while Max slept at their feet. "There are better medical facilities in Seattle, and I could check on her more often." "But that would mean Max loses Eleanor again," Margaret finished quietly. The thought of the separation that had driven Max to his desperate vigil sent a chill through her heart. Over the past 3 weeks, she had watched the remarkable bond between Eleanor and Max deepen even further. The elderly woman's visits had become the highlight of both Max's week and her own. Eleanor, who had been unusually quiet during David's announcement, finally spoke up. "I'm not going anywhere," she said with the firmness that reminded everyone she had once been a high school principal. "Max brought us together for a reason, and I'm not going to abandon that." The standoff between grandmother and grandson created tension that Max seemed to sense immediately. The intelligent puppy began displaying anxiety behaviors that worried Dr. Foster. Pacing, loss of appetite, and a return to the vigilant watching that had characterized his doorstep vigil. Margaret found herself in the difficult position of mediating between David's genuine concern for his grandmother and Eleanor's determination to stay close to Max. As a retired teacher, she understood family dynamics, but this situation was unlike anything she had encountered. "What if we found a compromise?" Margaret suggested during a family meeting that included Dr. Foster as a neutral party. Eleanor could spend part of the year in Seattle with David and part of the year here. Max could travel with her, or we could maintain the shared arrangement long distance. But even as she spoke, Margaret realized how complicated such an arrangement would be. Max was still a puppy who needed consistency and routine. The travel and constant changes would be stressful for him, and the logistics of shared custody across multiple states seemed overwhelming. The breakthrough came from Max himself. On a rainy Thursday evening, as the family tensions reached their peak, the young German Shepherd did something that surprised everyone. Instead of positioning himself between Eleanor and Margaret as he usually did, Max walked directly to David and sat down in front of him, staring up with those remarkably expressive brown eyes. David, who had been somewhat skeptical of the deep emotional connection everyone claimed to see in Max, found himself genuinely moved by the puppy's direct attention. "What do you want, little guy?" he asked, reaching down to pet Max's soft fur. Max's response was to bring David his favorite toy, a rope that Eleanor had given him during their first week together, and drop it at his feet. When David picked up the toy, Max's tail wagged enthusiastically for the first time since the family crisis had begun. "He's trying to include you," Margaret realized with wonder. "He's not just bonded to Eleanor and me, he wants you to be part of his pack too." Dr. Foster, who had been documenting Max's behavior throughout the crisis, nodded thoughtfully. "Max has demonstrated extraordinary problem-solving abilities from the beginning. He may be trying to solve this family conflict the same way he solved his original separation from Eleanor." Over the following days, Max began actively working to build a relationship with David. He would bring toys to share, seek attention and affection, and demonstrate the same loyalty and intelligence that had won over Margaret and Eleanor. David, despite his initial reservations about the complexity of the arrangement, found himself genuinely charmed by Max's persistent efforts to win him over. The solution they eventually reached was both simple and revolutionary. David decided to delay his transfer to Seattle for 6 months, giving him time to see how the Max arrangement truly worked and allowing him to build his own relationship with the remarkable dog who had brought his grandmother such joy. Maybe Max is right, David admitted during one of their evening walks around Maple Grove. Maybe family isn't about geography or convenience. Maybe it's about finding the people who choose to love you and then figuring out how to make it work. But the real test of their expanded family bond was still ahead, and it would come in a form that none of them expected. A crisis that would prove just how deep the connections Max had created really ran. The crisis that would define Max's unusual family came on a cold February morning when Eleanor failed to arrive for her regular Tuesday visit. Margaret had been looking forward to seeing her friend. Over the months, their relationship had evolved from convenient arrangement to genuine friendship. And Max had been waiting by the window since dawn, watching for Eleanor's familiar taxi. When Eleanor's assisted living facility called to report that she had been rushed to the hospital during the night with chest pains, Margaret felt her world shift. Max seemed to understand immediately that something was wrong, pacing anxiously and whining softly as Margaret gathered her coat and car keys. "She's going to be okay," Margaret told Max, though she wasn't sure she believed it herself. "We're going to see her right now." The drive to Illinois General Hospital was one of the longest of Margaret's life. Max sat in the passenger seat, unusually still and alert, as if he was focusing all his energy on sensing Eleanor's condition. When they arrived at the hospital, Margaret was devastated to learn that pets weren't allowed in the cardiac care unit where Eleanor was being treated. David arrived from Chicago within hours of getting Margaret's call, his face drawn with worry and guilt. "I should have insisted she come to Seattle with me," he said, staring at the cardiac care unit doors that separated them from Eleanor. "She's been pushing herself too hard, trying to maintain her independence." Dr. Sarah Martinez, Eleanor's cardiologist, explained that while Eleanor's condition was serious, it was treatable with medication and lifestyle changes. "She had a minor heart attack," Dr. Martinez explained. "At her age, recovery will take time, and she'll need more assistance with daily activities." Margaret felt her heart break as she realized what this meant for their arrangement with Max. Eleanor would need weeks of recovery, possibly in a rehabilitation facility, and even after that, her ability to maintain their regular visits would be severely limited. Max seemed to understand the gravity of the situation better than anyone. For 3 days he refused to leave the hospital parking lot. Margaret would drive him home in the evenings, but each morning he would stand by the door, ready to return to his vigil. The nursing staff, who had heard about Max's story, made special arrangements for him to visit Eleanor briefly each day during designated therapy animal hours. The transformation in Eleanor when she saw Max was remarkable. The elderly woman, who had been listless and discouraged since her heart attack, immediately brightened when the German Shepherd carefully climbed onto her hospital bed and settled beside her. "He's been waiting for you every day," Margaret told Eleanor, fighting back tears as she watched Max gently rest his head on Eleanor's arm. "He knew you needed him." But the emotional reunions couldn't change the practical reality of Eleanor's situation. After a week in the hospital, she was transferred to a rehabilitation facility that didn't allow pet visits. The separation was devastating for both Eleanor and Max, who resumed his anxious pacing and watching behavior. It was David who proposed the solution that would change everything. "What if Eleanor came to live with you?" he asked Margaret one evening as they sat in the hospital waiting room. "I know it's a huge ask, but she's already spending half her time at your house anyway, and you two have become so close." Margaret had been thinking the same thing but hadn't dared to voice it. Her house was certainly large enough. Robert had designed it with guest rooms for their children's families, and she had grown to love Eleanor's company almost as much as Max's. "The rehabilitation specialist thinks she could live independently with some daily assistance," David continued. "And honestly, I think being with you and Max might be better medicine than anything the doctors can prescribe." When they presented the idea to Eleanor, her response was immediate and emotional. "You would do that for me?" she asked Margaret through tears. "Take in a stubborn old woman and her stubborn dog." "Max brought us together for a reason," Margaret replied, echoing Eleanor's words from months earlier. Maybe this was always what he had in mind. The logistics of moving Eleanor from her assisted living facility to Margaret's house were complex. But the community that had rallied around Max's original vigil came together once again. Neighbors helped with the move, Dr. Foster coordinated Eleanor's medical care, and local businesses donated equipment to make Margaret's house more accessible. But the true test of their new family arrangement was yet to come, and it would prove that the bonds Max had created were strong enough to weather any storm. 6 months after Eleanor moved into Margaret's home, their unconventional family had found a rhythm that seemed to surprise everyone except Max. The German Shepherd, now a confident and intelligent year-old dog, had become the unofficial coordinator of their household, seeming to understand everyone's needs and routines with remarkable precision. Eleanor had made a full recovery from her heart attack, aided by the daily companionship of both Margaret and Max. Her morning walks with Max had improved her physical strength, while her afternoons helping Margaret with household tasks and cooking had given her a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. Margaret discovered that sharing her home with Eleanor had filled a loneliness she hadn't fully acknowledged. Their different backgrounds, Margaret's years in education and Eleanor's career in social work, gave them endless topics for conversation, and their shared love for Max created a bond that transcended their age difference. David, who had ultimately decided to take the transfer to Seattle, visited every few weeks and had been amazed by the transformation in his grandmother. "She's more energetic now than she was 5 years ago," he told Margaret during his latest visit. "And Max has turned into an incredible therapy dog." It was true. Max's natural intelligence and empathy had developed into remarkable abilities. He seemed to sense when Eleanor was having a difficult day and would stay close by her side. When Margaret was working in her garden, he would position himself where he could watch both women simultaneously. His presence had a calming effect on both of them, and neighbors often commented on how peaceful and content their household seemed. The story of Max's determination and the family he had created had continued to resonate far beyond Maple Grove. Dr. Thompson had published a research paper about Max's case, highlighting the sophisticated problem-solving abilities that domestic dogs could display when motivated by strong emotional bonds. The paper had been cited in animal behavior journals around the world. Local news station WQED featured an update on Max's story 1 year after his original vigil, showing the thriving household he had created through his refusal to abandon Margaret's doorstep. The segment highlighted how all 3 members of their unusual family had found exactly what they needed through Max's intervention. "He saw something that none of us could see," Eleanor explained to the reporter as Max demonstrated his latest trick, bringing Eleanor her medication at precisely the right times each day. "He knew that Margaret needed family just as much as I did, and that we could take care of each other." Margaret had begun volunteering at the local animal shelter, sharing Max's story with potential adopters and encouraging them to consider older animals who might need special arrangements. "Sometimes the perfect match isn't the obvious one," she would tell families. "Sometimes you have to trust that animals know things we don't." The shelter had even established a program inspired by Max's story, connecting elderly pet owners who needed assistance with younger families who could provide support, allowing beloved pets to remain with their original families while getting the care they needed. Max's influence extended beyond their immediate household. The elderly residents at Eleanor's former assisted living facility still received regular visits from Max, who had become a certified therapy dog. His calm presence and obvious intelligence made him particularly effective at providing comfort to residents dealing with loneliness or anxiety. On the anniversary of Max's first appearance on Margaret's doorstep, the entire neighborhood gathered for a celebration that had become an annual tradition. Children who had grown up hearing Max's story brought their own pets to meet the famous German Shepherd who had taught their community about determination and family. As the sun set on that celebratory day, Margaret and Eleanor sat on their front porch watching Max play with the neighborhood children. The same doorstep where he had maintained his mysterious vigil was now the center of a warm, thriving home. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't answered your door that morning?" Eleanor asked Margaret as they watched Max demonstrate his remarkable intelligence to an admiring crowd. Margaret smiled, remembering the lonely woman she had been just 1 year earlier. "I think Max would have stayed there until I did," she said. "He was determined to create this family and nothing was going to stop him." Max, as if sensing their conversation, trotted over to sit between their chairs, his tail wagging contentedly. His mission, begun with a 3-day vigil on a stranger's doorstep, was complete. He had found a way to bring together 3 souls who needed each other, proving that family isn't just about blood relations. It's about the people who choose to love and care for each other, no matter how unlikely the circumstances. If this story of determination, unexpected friendship, and the power of chosen family has touched your heart, Remember that every day, animals demonstrate the same loyalty and problem-solving abilities that we witnessed in Max's remarkable journey. Their capacity to understand human emotions and create connections reminds us that love comes in many forms and that sometimes the most perfect families are the ones we never planned. Subscribe to our channel to discover more stories of animals whose intelligence and devotion inspire us to believe in the power of persistence and love. Like this video if Max's story moved you, and share it with someone who understands that home isn't a place. It's wherever your family chooses to be together. Together, we can celebrate the remarkable spirits who show us that the best solutions often come from the most unexpected sources.